And good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the Pat Miller Program here on Saturday, every Saturday from noon to 2. Remember, after the program, if you want to go back and hear part of what we discussed, for example, Philip Wegman will be with us in the 1 o'clock segment of the program today. If you miss it, or if you just want to hear parts of his comment a second time, go to wowo.com, go to programs, find my show, Pat Miller Program, and there you will find our podcasts by hour. We've got the first hour of today's program. It will be first. The second hour will be second. Am I going too fast for you, Kamala? And so we'll have both of those on there. And then afterwards, go and check all the rest. Everyone that we've done since we've moved to Saturday, beginning back in March, they're all there, and you can go back and you can listen to all of them. The aforementioned Philip Wegman from Real Clear Politics, he'll be with us at the start of the next hour, and I want to get his take. He had a recent article out on his website there at his daytime show, if you would, his real life job. This isn't his real life job. I'm just telling you. But he says Kamala Harris makes her case against Trump, and she tries to, and he's talking a little bit about her interview, live, not live, edited, not edited, all of that. And we're going to go through that with Philip Wegman, who's heard all of these people go through everything that they do. We're going to talk about Ford Motor Company coming up in a little while. We're going to talk about Don Lemon, and his jaw actually hit the floor when he interviewed 8 voters on his program the other day. And now we've got people on Capitol Hill changing their stories about January the 6th. Nancy Pelosi, now you tell us. We'll go through all of that. Hi again. Thanks for being here. Let's get started, shall we? Staying away from traditional venue for communication and for scrutiny, so mark that as interactions with the press, has allowed Kamala Harris aides to now float the idea that she has changed positions and moved to the center from her failed run for the Democratic nomination in 2019, when she was solidly in the progressive lane of the party. By using aides to float her new positions, she could put out word without putting out word with her own face on it, leaving the impression that she has changed views without her actually saying anywhere that she has changed her views. This is why she wanted to do the interview the way that she did it. If you've not seen it, you can see it on CNN. After my conversation with Philip Wegman, I'm going to play you 3 what I call some intriguing cuts from her time there on CNN. And it's just weird and it's bizarre. She did this interview. They went in. She took her vice presidential candidate with her, the governor of Minnesota, so that she had, some bumper music there. But they're sitting there and they're interviewed on CNN the entire time that the interview was up on TV. In the corner, it says live, giving everybody the impression that the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, was sitting in the studio with this reporter live at the time that they were doing the interview, and it's not true. It's not true. Now, if you have a campaign person who lies about things, we jump on them. Should somebody be jumping on CNN? Why are you lying, CNN? Was that one of the things that you had to tell them you would do in order to get the interview? If we say it's live, and so even though it's going to be recorded and edited, by the way, will it make her look more on par? Will it look like she was more off the top of her head? Will that do it? Well, you shall see. Here's part of the problem. I get this from Ben Shapiro. Love Ben Shapiro. And Shapiro says this: at no point do Democrats want Americans to understand just what Kamala Harris will do as president or connect her to what she's already done as vice president. They keep asking, well, what do you say about what's happened for the last 3.5 years? And without coming right out and saying it, she's basically saying, well, I couldn't have any policy for the last 3.5 years. I was only vice president. Well, if you're the second highest rated politician, policy holder, and position holder in the entire country, you're telling me that you didn't have the president's ear. Remember when the whole thing came about them leaving Afghanistan the way they did, in the dismal way that cost the lives of 13 of our brave young men and women? there in the capital of Afghanistan as they withdrew in a way that they tried to blame Trump for, but it was not the way he laid it out, not in his party, not in his cabinet, not when he talked to the military. He had some basic ideas, but they had decided together, he and the military, that they needed to do it on a time span that made sense and did not leave people hanging. And they did not want to leave a lot of resources for somebody else to come in and scoop up and steal and use. But isn't that what happened? Isn't that what happened? Listen, Donald Trump did not pull the plug on Afghanistan. Just because Trump had a plan on how to get out of Afghanistan, because they implemented it incorrectly, and because we lost an air base, and because we left billions of dollars worth of war material in Afghanistan, and because we lost the lives of 13 Americans just outside the airport, they're blaming Trump. Well, he had the original plan to get out of Afghanistan, and okay, but you pulled the plug, right? You pulled the plug, right? And this is where you get into homina. Now, I would ask her to quote, she, the vice president, to quote the president on what he said that night, because she comes out proudly and says, I was the last person out of the room. In other words, nobody knew more about what went down that night than I did. But they don't question her on that. Come on, CNN, in your live interview, why didn't you hit her with that? Would they have not done the same thing to Mike Pence? If there was some activity that occurred that Donald Trump did and Pence was around, would they not have pinned that on Mike Pence? Yeah, they would. Absolutely they would. Scott Jennings, he's a Republican strategist. He said, weak sauce for Kamala Harris to demand an emotional supply animal for her first interview. Who's that? Her supply animal, okay, her supply support emotional animal is her vice presidential candidate, Governor Wall, Minnesota. It shows an extreme lack of confidence, and I think it does. I mean, I really think it does. People say, well, right after the Republican convention 4 years ago, Trump and Pence did an interview together. Yeah, right there, just right after it ended. That's when they did it. This has been, 3-4 weeks since the Democratic National Committee, and she's finally getting around to doing it? And she had to have him there? Absolutely nuts. Look, a lot of things have changed in the last few weeks. We had RFK dropping out of the race. So after that, Democrats in Michigan and Wisconsin are now fighting to keep him on the ballot. Why? Because some people that really love RFK might get confused and they might go ahead and vote for him. Well, RFK Jr. has stepped away and done what? He has endorsed Donald Trump. Donald Trump. He dropped out. The party of democracy, everybody. Let's go. If you want to do what RFK wanted you to do, vote for Donald Trump. Vote for Donald Trump. I love history. And the other night, can't remember if it was Monday night, Tuesday night, Winston Churchill, who died in 1965, and I got reacquainted with him a bit when Kim and I watched through the miniseries from the British Broadcasting Network on The Crown about the life and the term in office of Queen Elizabeth. And I got reacquainted with Winston Churchill. What a giant. He said this, if you will not fight for right when you can easily win without bloodshed, if you will not fight when your victory will be sure and not too costly, you may come to the moment when you will have to fight with all odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival. There may be even a worse fate. You may have to fight when there is no hope of victory, because it is better to perish than it is to live as slaves. Let's take that last line again. I put it on my phone. Put this on your phone. It is better to perish than to live as slaves. Take that any way you want. We had some great patriots in our first century here in this country, those who signed the Constitution and those who surrounded them. This was very much a call to them. This is what they would have said. And we've lost all that now. I don't know of anybody, either party, by the way, who would take this as their moniker, and they should. Thanks for being with us. More coming up straight ahead right after this quick break right here on WOWO 92.3 FM and 1190 AM. And again, welcome to you. Welcome to the Pat Miller Program here on this Saturday as we are together here, you and I, as we try to go through the things of this week and recap them on Saturday as we always do. Remember, when I'm here or even after I'm gone, you can always reach me by email, Pat Miller, all one word, no dots or dashes, patmiller@wowo.com. It's not real often, whether you like him or don't like him, that Don Lemon is caught off guard very much. Well, I think he was caught off guard this time. Don Lemon had put together a little interview that he wanted to do with Election Day just around the corner. And so the fact that it's going to be a really, really, really tight race from all indications, some of you that are Trump supporters are like, no, because I'm just telling you, if you don't fight like this election is close, you're going to lose it that it's close. I still think it's Donald Trump's to win. But he's going to have to decide exactly what the race is that he's running. And those that are with him, they need to decide it too. Forget everything that we heard leading up to the Democratic National Convention. If the Democrats did anything, they so clouded the view, they so shrouded her in elegance, and they so laid the crown on her head delicately to anoint her as the next president of the United States. And so a lot of the Democrats that had wavered away from her, not all, but a lot, are now coming back home to Kamala. But Don Lemon, in the midst of trying to have this handful of voters that he wanted to talk to, all of them brought in from those crucial swing states, these voters that he had there defied his radical narrative. And I mean defied it. The CNN host could literally not believe his ears that after these voters told him the last thing he wanted to hear, with Election Day just more than 2 months away, both presidential candidates have hit the campaign trail desperately trying to win over in key swing states. Dividing voters on the basis of race and gender is a top strategy for Democrats, with many prominent Democrats, including Kamala Harris, claiming that Donald Trump does not stand for women and racial minorities. However, polls are showing that Hispanic voters, black male voters, and some female voters have moved into Donald Trump's column in the last 2 weeks, giving him a crucial advantage in many parts of the country. And on Tuesday of this week, CNN released a video of host Don Lemon speaking to a group of 6 women who all live in the Cleveland, Ohio area, and was questioning them about, okay, who are you going to vote for? Now, out of these 6 women, one told Donald Lemon that they intended to vote for Donald Trump. The first one that they had, Lemon spoke to that person and she said, I'm voting for Trump. I feel like every time they don't want somebody who is good for us to win, they throw somebody black in our face, thinking that's going to make us vote for the black person. She added, I'm voting for Trump. Kamala was on the Biden team, and I don't like Biden. Gas wasn't this high when Trump was our president. Food wasn't this high when Trump was our president. I'm going to vote for Trump. The second woman, a woman that Donald Trump talked to, kind of echoed the same remarks as the first woman. And now I vote more what fits me better as a person. I voted for Obama because he was black. I don't want to vote for her because she's the first black woman to run for president to win. I want to vote for somebody who's going to bring change. I'm supporting Trump because it has to change. It has to change. And now I vote more for what fits me better as a person rather than voting for the black person or voting for the first woman. The fifth woman that Lemon spoke to expressed her concerns about Kamala Harris, saying, I think she's pretty phony, and I think she's fake. I'm saying, I'm like Trump saying, what are you? So I'm not feeling her. People get mad about it, and I'm just not feeling her. Well, those remarks from these women in Cleveland really shook Don Lemon because he thought these women would all be Kamala supporters. Polls and case studies show that many voters are voting with their pocketbooks this November. Democrat politicians and pundits have worked tirelessly, endlessly, to divide voters by race, gender, and other grounds. But voters are showing that many of them are planning to vote with their pocketbooks regardless of the identifying features. Inflation continues to be the big pusher for Americans, which could help those who determine who will win this November, with many voters blaming Kamala Harris and Joe Biden for these economic woes. When you see a problem with economic difficulties on the previous administration, it feels like the previous administration, but this is still the Biden administration. I think he's still breathing. But if that's what it is, well, then at that point, she is part of that administration. She is part of that administration. And all these divides are starting to cause some difficulties. I've talked to you about the difficulties now with these 6 black women interviewed in Cleveland. Let's go up to the corporate level, shall we? A small little mom and pop store, Ford Motor Company. They are walking back their woke DEI policies, and they're joining a growing list of companies in doing it. They're backing away from some of the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, becoming the latest American firm to pump the brakes on woke policies this year. People like John Deere, Lowe's, and Tractor Supply, they've already done it. Anti-woke activist and filmmaker Robbie Starbuck, who's been leading a campaign exposing major corporations' woke policies, reported on X on Wednesday that he was in the middle of an investigation of Ford when the company sent him documentation indicating that it's already making changes. Jim Farley, CEO at Ford, he sat and he told Starbuck in his post that he sent to him, he said the chief executive stated the external and legal environment related to political and social issues continues to evolve. And thus, in the past year, the company has taken a fresh look at our policies and practices. That's something that Kamala and the Democrats don't want. They don't want people taking fresh looks. In the letter, Farley laid out a series of bullet points telling the Ford workforce that the company does not utilize quotas in hiring and saying that it prioritizes its resources for business purposes versus publicly commenting on the many polarizing issues of the day. In other words, we're not going to spend $1 billion of Ford money on all this woke stuff. We would rather pump it back into the company, make life better for you, be able to pay you more. Farley said the company has evolved its employee resource group, ERG, noting that of all its ERGs, they're all open to all employees. Ford made this decision earlier in the year to no longer participate in the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equity Index, which is an annual survey and report used to gauge policies, practices, and benefits pertinent to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer employees. Okay, so that's what they're demanding. Are they also demanding that Ford put out great vehicles? Are they also demanding that when the new Ford Escape comes out, it'll be as great as the one that Kim now drives, so when it comes time for us to trade vehicles, we're not going to have to worry about staying with Ford? Or are they going to be so wrapped up in all this internal, politically right, all this stuff that they can't do their own job? I don't go to Ford to tell me how I should treat transgender people or bisexual people or kids that are questioning their own sexuality. I go to them for great vehicles that they can stand behind. The Human Rights Campaign, HRC, one of the largest and most progressive nonprofits in the country, condemned this move by Ford. Here's what they said, and I quote, "Today, Ford Motor Company abandoned its commitment to hundreds of thousands of employees by cowering to internet troll Bobby Starbuck and signaling that inclusion and other core values are no longer a priority in the workplace." Okay, how about this? Did they abandon that commitment to hundreds of thousands of employees, or have they made the job of keeping the employees they have and looking at people who come to Ford for employment and looking at them by their talent and by their abilities and by their surveys rather than some politically made list of do's and don'ts? Let's tell the whole story, shall we? Look, I don't need to know how many people who put my car together were gay or they like gays or they want to be gay. I just need to know, are they good at what they do, and does Ford Motors stand behind what they've done? That's what matters to me. More coming up straight ahead right here on Whoa Whoa. Hey, welcome back to this second half hour of the Pat Miller program on this Saturday. So very glad that you're with us here as we're drawing August to a close and getting ready for September. Can you believe that? I mean, can you honestly believe that? Last night was the second week of football for high schools here in the Indiana area. It's unbelievable to me that that's where we are, but guess what? That's where we are. Just hard for me to imagine. Glad you're here. Okay, now she tells us Have you ever had somebody say something and you go, now you're telling me? Well, now she tells us. Nancy Pelosi finally admitted some fault about January the 6th. She was on an interview, and Nancy Pelosi in this interview said that if you go to page 724 of Appendix 2, that's where you need to go to find an account of the D.C. National Guard preparation for and response to January the 6th. Get that? Appendix 2, page 724. Here's part of the problem, and I've seen it. The book is only 694 pages long. 694 is somewhat less of 724, isn't it? So page 724 doesn't exist. In order to view Appendix 2 and get the scoop on the National Guard's involvement in the events, you have to go to visit January6thhouse.gov. January6thhouse.gov. And that's where you're going to find it. Why isn't it in the book? Because if it was in the book, everybody could read it. Well, can't everybody read it online? Look, most people don't go traveling around finding things online like I do and like most of you do. Most people in America are not like you. They get their politics spoon-fed. Now, I'm mentioning all this because of these new videos that are surfacing of Nancy Pelosi and a small entourage video scurrying down the halls of the Capitol building as she is being evacuated on January 6th, and then ranting to her staff as she's being driven away from the Capitol in a car. Where did these videos come from? They're being shot by somebody for HBO, and they were made public Wednesday by a filmmaker who is, you ready for the name? Alexandra Pelosi, her daughter. Well, the Republican-led House Committee on Administration had these videos coughed up by HBO, who is carrying this stuff for Nancy Pelosi. And in the videos, Pelosi repeatedly expresses her regret that the National Guard had not been called and pre-positioned, by the way, to protect the Capitol ahead of everything that was going to happen on the certification day there up from the 2020 election. She said it should have happened. In one 28-second clip, Pelosi laments, how many times did members ask, are we prepared? Are we prepared? We're not prepared for the worst. We're calling for the National Guard now? They should have been here to start. In another clip, Pelosi tells her chief of staff, Terry McCullough, as they're driving away from the Capitol, we have responsibility, Terry. We did not have any accountability for what was going on there, and we should have. This is ridiculous. You're going to ask me in the middle of the thing when they've already breached the inaugural stuff, should we call the Capitol Police? I mean the National Guard. Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with? Excellent question, Madam Speaker. Why weren't they? Pelosi admits, and I quote Nancy Pelosi, we have totally failed. In another clip, oh my God, I can't believe the stupidity of this, and I take full responsibility. It's quite a series of confessions from Pelosi, especially given the fact that President Donald Trump had previously approved the deployment of, write this down, 10,000 National Guardsmen. 10,000 to protect the Capitol on that day, only to have that show of force declined by whom? By two people, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser and Nancy Pelosi. And especially given that the aftermath of January the 6th, Pelosi and her Democrat colleagues blamed everybody but themselves. One of Pelosi's fall guys, former Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund, posted this in response. Pelosi was surprised we didn't have National Guard on January the 6th. I was denied National Guard support multiple times before January 6th and repeatedly for 71 minutes on January the 6th. My story, this is Sund talking, my story has not changed. He shared a lot of this in a take that he did with Tucker Carlson. And among the key takeaways from that interview, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI hid intelligence from the Capitol Police, leaving them with virtually no sense of what was coming that day. Sund said, I've done many national security events, and this was handled differently. No intelligence, no coordination, no discussion in advance. What possible motive might the FBI have had for failing to share such intel with the people most responsible for securing the Capitol? Might it be because such a show of force might have ended the riot even before it began? Sund also confirmed to Tucker Carlson that he was twice refused the preemptive National Guard presence that he requested in the days before January the 6th. It wasn't just Republicans, as you're hearing. You had the head of the security at the Capitol, who is not a Republican, requesting in the days leading up to January the 6th. He says, I was denied twice because of optics and because the intelligence didn't support us. I was denied by Paul Irving, House Sergeant at Arms, and also Mike Stinger, Senate Sergeant at Arms. Looking at you, Nancy Pelosi. Well, how can you say that? Because she's in charge of the Sergeant at Arms. She was the Speaker of the House. And Politico now reports, Politico, not a right-wing, not a conservative rag, Politico now reports, quote, though clips of the Speaker's conversations that day were shown as part of the previous panel's work and in a separate documentary by Alexandra Pelosi, much of what was handed over recently to a House Administration Subcommittee has never been released. HBO did not immediately respond to a request for comment. We silly, stupid Americans. We thought the January 6th committee was engaged in a search for the truth. No wonder it didn't want Pelosi didn't want Sund to testify in the January the 6th hearings. The Times have found us, Pelosi blurted to Andrea Mitchell on MSNBC during last week's Democratic National Convention. In doing so, she called the threat to our democracy posed by Donald Trump of a kind we have not seen since the War for Independence in 1776 and then during the Civil War. Well, in the wake of these new videos, the Times have finally found Nancy Pelosi. Is she responsible? I think she is, and I'm not real sure how she avoids that. We're going to be talking in the next half hour with our good friend from Real Clear Politics. He is their White House correspondent there in Washington, D.C., Philip Wegman, and he's going to talk about the fact that Kamala Harris makes her case against Donald Trump. He's going to make the fact that when the balloons dropped on the DNC, Beyonce was not there. Any of the other big name surprise guesses were not there, but the delegates and the guests in the United Center were more than content with Kamala Harris, and now the very real possibility that she could become America's first female president. In fact, they were thrilled. And why not? I mean, now I'm not knocking this because this is how the Republicans do it too. But you get these delegates that are there. They don't pay to be there. Their transportation is paid to be there. Their hotel rooms are paid to be there. They are wined and dined the entire time that they're in either Chicago with the Democrats or Milwaukee with the Republicans. And it just goes on and on and on. So at the point when Kamala Harris walked on stage so that she could accept the nomination, the crowd roared chants of Kamala and USA, 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 caught the energy of the moment until finally the vice president beamed, laughed. It wasn't quite the cackle, but it was close, and took it all in before finally calling for quiet. She said, okay, let's get down to business. And this business was twofold. I'm going to talk to Philip Wegman about this and get his take on what it was that happened at the DNC. And I want to get his take on the recent things with Nancy's new interview that she did with CNN, that big groundbreaking interview. I want to talk to him about that. Is Donald Trump and his campaign in trouble? Yes or no? I think we need to know. Oh, Pat, now you're just out there, you're just sowing discord, and you're trying to make us worry. I'm trying to make us into the realm of reality. We need to know what's coming on. And I've always found Philip Wegman to be very clear and very upfront with me and with you. He's not a yes guy. Let's find out what Philip Wegman says about Kamala Harris making her case against Donald Trump in the aftermath of the DNC there in Chicago. That all comes up after the top of the hour, and we'll talk with him about that. Other things coming up straight ahead right here on WOWO 92.3 FM, 1190 AM. Hey, welcome back to our last little segment as we close out the first hour of the Pat Miller program here on this Saturday. And we always here. And remember, you can write me when I'm here or when I'm gone, and it's pretty easy to do right here at WOWO.com. You can write me at Pat Miller, all one word, no dots or dashes, at WOWO.com. Well, I always pick on the state of California. I always give them a hard time, but I'm going to go honest with them here. They're doing some things which are obviously the right thing to do, and we'll talk about it here, and then you tell me. You remember, you can text me at patmiller@wowo.com. California officials have ticketed somebody down in the greater San Diego area because of a difficulty that he was causing in public. Sandy Shankenbrook, known as the Bubble Pirate, was donating and donning his efforts and his pirate costume and performing his usual bubble show at La Jolla Cove in San Diego last week when he was issued a ticket by park officials. Okay, this is a guy that does bubbles, and it's more than just blowing little ones. He's got this machine where he can make them, and he makes large bubbles. He can step inside the bubbles, all kinds of things. Well, the ticket alleges that Schankenberg, age 63, violated San Diego's municipal code against littering because of the fluid from his bubbles. Let me say this one more time, please. He was ticketed for fluid littering. Whew. Those of you on a Friday, Saturday night when you come out of the bar and you're a little too tipsy and you drop your beer and beer spreads across the sidewalk there in front of your favorite bar, get ready to get ticketed because of fluid littering. He said in the phone interview that the park ranger was noting that the liquid was from bubbles, but the officer did not put it that way. In other words, he said, please, if you're going to ticket me for littering with liquid, please put down in there that it is liquid from the bubbles that I'm making here to entertain children and adults. And the officer would not do that. The ticket mandates that Schankenberg appear in court in October. He told Fox News Digital that he is a disabled Navy veteran who has traveled all over the world for a variety of jobs in his life. He once owned a gym in Singapore because he tried to benefit others, veterans and other people who had special needs. He said he had dyslexia. He makes his living from this bubble artistry and his entertainment that he does. The van with all of his equipment and his props doubles as his home. I was becoming more involved with bubbles, more professionally, making my own bubble juice, my own devices. I did a TED Talk while I was in Singapore. Have you done a TED Talk? I've never done one. I have people who keep writing me saying, you ought to do a TED Talk about this or about that. I just don't think I'm that with it to do something like a TED Talk. He said he called his 2016 delivery on TED Talk Lessons of the Bubbles, and it described online as a presentation of his journey and his lessons that he personally had learned, not just from the bubbles, but from his observations of others when they were exposed or re-exposed to their magic. During that time, I suffered heart failure, then started to do a trip around the world doing bubbles modeled after my TED Talk. The talk was based on a sociological experience with bubbles and their connective properties. Quote, I was just enjoying blowing the simple bubbles that you blow and people walk by and were enjoying them. I got kind of hooked on the joy of sharing all this, and that grew into what he practices today. I practice what is known as bubbleology. It's a real thing, he said. Lately, he said vendors and artists in the community have been getting herded into designated 4 feet by 8 feet areas by officials. So if you're there in the parks area in San Diego, you've got a 4 foot by 8 foot area and you have to stay in it. Most of you are taller than 4 feet. Most of you are just somewhat shorter than, the 8 feet long. You're longer than the 4 feet, shorter than the 8 feet, but a 4 by 8, that's not real big, is it? They're making everybody fight for these 4 by 8 spaces, which are limited, he said. They are not located where artists would have chosen for themselves. I choose my location for safety reasons, both environmental and public, because if my bubbles go flying off into the streets, so will the kids. I mean, this guy is thinking about public safety. But no, they're going to nail him anyway. A City of San Diego Parks and Recreation Department spokesperson was interviewed by Fox News by email, and this is the quote from San Diego. The City of San Diego values the rights of community members to engage in expressive activity in city parks, including artistic expression. This does require those engaging in these activities to do so in accordance with other city codes and regulations, including those related to littering and disposal of waste. Did you get that? These substances from his bubbles are in violation of the city's municipal code as it relates to littering. The individual uses up to 6 gallons of liquid per day, with the residual chemicals ending up in the lawn areas, which can cause damage to the grass. He's been doing this for 10 years. Has that happened with the grass? Not everything that makes a bubble will damage your lawn. Did you know that? Have you ever blown bubbles out front with your kids? Did you come out the next morning and find parts of your grass burnt? After witnessing numerous violations and receiving complaints from other park users, rangers issued the lowest level citation possible. Here's what he said. If I thought I was in any way damaging the environment or hurting people, I couldn't have been around very long. And I've been doing this for 10 years. 10 years. Again, of all the things, and look, and I love San Diego. Kim and I, we've only been there once, but we loved it. And we fell in love with old San Diego, a gorgeous area that is different from the whole rest of the city. It is old San Diego. I mean, they've got running water and electricity and all that. But the buildings are very, very, very old San Diego, and terrific restaurants. I think there's like 20 restaurants in a very small area. One of the greatest chicken marsalas I'd ever had in my life, I had there at that restaurant in old San Diego. Beautiful. Kim and I had a fantastic time there, and we were spending some time there because we were trying to find out what it was that made old San Diego different from everything else. So we were out there for a convention meeting that I had, but Kim and I went out 3 days early and went to San Diego, into old San Diego, before we went out to the island there and visited the hotel, the famous hotel that's out there on the island, and made our presence known at our meeting. And I will tell you this, and this is nothing against the people that had anything to do with our meeting that we had out there on the island, but the hotel, famous as it was, you see it in all like the 50s and the 60s movies. Jack Nicklaus was in a movie that was a comedy, and it was supposedly happening down in Florida. It was actually filmed in this hotel there in San Diego. But I will tell you, we had a great time, and I mean a great time there in old San Diego. Except for once or twice, we actually walked to the places we needed to go. We stayed not at the Hotel Ritz. We stayed in a Holiday Inn Express, if memory serves me correctly, and we stayed there and just had a fabulous time. And we just had, and there's so much in San Diego. We were a stone's throw away from New San Diego. We were a stone and a half throw away from the San Diego Zoo. We got to witness all of that. It's just an incredible place. I love San Diego. I really do. I love Coronado Island and the Hotel Del there on Coronado Island. Beautiful place, just absolutely gorgeous. But when I read stories like this, it's like, let the rest of California get stupid. And they're doing that. Let them get stupid and leave the rest of us alone. Just let us go about our merry little business and leave the rest of us alone. We'll see how that works. We do all this, and we'll talk straight ahead with Philip Wegman from Real Clear Politics. They're in Washington, D.C., and we'll do it just as soon as we get him online here, live from D.C., and unlike Kamala, when I say live, I'm going to talk to him live, okay? So that's how that works. From Real Clear Politics, their White House correspondent, we're going to talk to him about, is Kamala Harris making her case against Donald Trump? Let's get his take on it. He'll shoot straight with us, and I'll shoot straight with you. We do it straight ahead on WOWO 92.3 FM and 1190 AM.
Podcasts by Federated Media.